All right, so in the previous class, we were talking about how to define and use a function. As you can see, it takes 2 arguments here, it takes 3 here, and this one overrides the previous one, so you can only do this now, right? And you can see now when you want to call a function, it's restricted to, or it's required to give it the argument that it requires. Like this one requires 3 arguments, and you have to pass in 3 arguments to be able to call it. If you only pass in 2, you got arrows because it takes 3, so the arrow will say it's missing one required positional argument, argument 3, right? Cool. Now, what if you wanted to be more flexible? Like, I kind of wanted to be able to say, okay, I want to be able to pass in just 2 arguments, and the 3rd argument, if I don't give it, just use a default value, right? We can do that by typing in a equals 4. Okay. What this does is basically saying, okay, argument 3, if I don't tell what the argument 3 is, then just use 4. Let's try run this again. You can see now we do. Oh, actually, it doesn't do that. So let's see. It should be doing that. I guess we just need to reload this again. Restart. Okay, and let's try this again. It's not happy here either. Let me put it here maybe, and we can delete this one, cut that out. Let's stop this again and restart and run this again. Doesn't really like that. Oh, it's of course it's not doing anything because we're not printing it. Let me do that. Okay, we don't get arrows, so that's good. So now you can see we're getting 7 because the argument 3, even we don't give it a actual value, it does have a default value. So if we don't give it the value here, it's gonna use the default value. So 1 plus 2 plus 4 equals 7. Just be aware that those kind of like arguments that has default value should be put it on the very end. So if you make this one, if you give argument 1 a default value of 7, but after argument 1 you got argument 2 that doesn't have a default value, you got this arrow, non-default argument follows default argument. That's not allowed. So if you wanted to have argument 1 to have a default value, argument 1 should be behind every argument that doesn't have default value. So argument 2, if you put argument 2 in front, then it's okay again, right? So be aware of that. Another thing you can do is if all 3 has default values, right? And you wanted to say, okay, I want to change argument 1 only, and I use default value for the other 2. You can say plus here in the argument, we can say argument 1 equals to 10. So we're specifically saying argument 1 equals 10, and the others just use the default settings. Now if we go ahead and run this, we got 18, which is 4 plus 4 plus 10, right? So you can specifically tell which argument to be a value you want to use instead of the default value. Okay. Another thing we can do is, what if I want to pass like so many different values together? I don't know how many do I want. Maybe I want to pass in like a list of different arguments, or just a list of possible argument that I don't really know how many I will have. That requires another different way of defining this function. So let me do that. Let's define this time multiply. So I don't know how many values I want to multiply together. I could use 4, I could use 5, I could use whatever. So I just need to type in a asterisk and then the arguments, and then comma here, a column here. And then what I can do is I can do a for loop inside of it. So for number in arguments. Okay. And let's start with number 1. So number or return number will be equals to 1 to start with, and for numbers in argument we just multiply those together. So return, that's TURN, return number, it will be equals to the return number times the number here. Now, because this is a for loop, it's going to loop through all the argument we give it one by one and multiply them one by one to the return number, and they're going to be bigger and bigger, right? Or multiplied together at least. Okay. Now, after this for loop, we return. Make sure that this return is outside of the for loop. Otherwise, you will return right away in the first loop. Okay. And then we return this return number. Okay. All right. Now let's go ahead and call this function. So let's go ahead and try this. Multiply will be equals to multiply results. Or let's call this mult equals to multiply. Right, this is the function we just defined. And then we can pass in whatever argument we want to have, like 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1. You don't want 0, otherwise you got 0 eventually. Right, we can print out the mult, and then we run this. Got an error here. Number is not defined. I missed a B here. Okay, let's run this again. You can see we got this huge number. That's basically the multiplication of all of these together. Okay, so if you don't know how many arguments you need, you can do this. Alright, so that's gonna be another thing we can do with functions, just to make it a little bit more flexible. Alright, cool. So let's move on to the next video.